Thank you. I was told I was 10 out of 10 because 9 out of 10 startups fail. I was never very good at stats, so much for that. I'm the CEO and founder of Collegefeed. My name's Sanjeev Agrawal. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to help college students and people who've recently graduated kickstart their careers. So basically the idea is that we believe that people in college, people who've graduated a few years from, in the last few years, it's 2007, in the last 5 years, have a really hard time first figuring out how to present themselves without a lot of work experience, figuring out they're exploring opportunities that they should be exploring, understanding companies that might be interesting to them, connecting to the right people in those companies, because typically they don't have a very vast network. And so we believe there is the need for a platform early on in a college student's career to give you everything you need personalized to you to kickstart your career. Where the product stands today is there's a few features that we've introduced. There's a lot of problems that can be solved here. But when a student joins Collegefeed or an early grad joins Collegefeed, they tell us three things. They tell us a few of their interests, they tell us the companies that they like, and they point us to their bio or their resume. And what we automatically generate for them is a much better looking profile which highlights portfolios of, it's a portfolio-based approach as opposed to a work experience-based approach. We take the input signals we get about the companies they like and their interest areas, and we generate a much wider variety of job listings from across the web, some that we have direct relationships with and some that we just aggregate. We have a Pandora-like engine that basically says, hey, if you like Google and big data, by the way, you know, Safeway had a lot more big data before Google ever started. And so being able to expose students to a much wider array of options, which by the way are also very interesting for companies from a monetization perspective to be shown in the same light because they're solving hard problems. Given the size and nature of the community now, we are able to actually connect students. We're launching this tomorrow, where students can interact with each other, discover others with similar interests, as well as their competition. We have a section which crowdsources interview notes, and there's several hundred of them already on Collegefeed. These are students telling other students how they did, how they got those interviews. And then finally, the couple of things from a company perspective is companies can sponsor contests as well as host networking events, which can turn into career fairs. From a traction perspective, we have tens of thousands of students on the network. We launched in May. We have hundreds of employers that we have direct relationships with that have written to us or we've gone out and sold to them. Schools, obviously one of the biggest paths to customer acquisition for us. Turns out we thought we'd be the biggest enemies of career centers. Turns out career centers love this because of the pressure on, time's up, okay.
All right, last feedback here. Collegefeed, food for kids.
Sanjeev,
Sure.
I know you just ran out of time, but what's the business model? Can you just tell us?
So companies pay us for several things, starting with branding. So companies like Cisco, eBay, GoDaddy are already paying customers. The problem they have is being relevant to students who all want to work for Facebook and Google. So we do a lot of work with companies to help them figure out how to speak to millennials. There is a subscription model to go search the database to go hire students, and then there is an agency model where they pay per hire.
Rick.
Mitch Kapor has this thing about the gap between rich and poor, and that some ed tech companies kind of widen the gap, and because it provides access to the rich and not the poor, and some close the gap. So can you talk about which of those you are? Do you democratize the job hunt or make it more exclusive, or how would you describe it?
So we think that the gap between rich and poor is often an information gap. If you go to Stanford, you probably get a lot more hand-holding in terms of companies who come on campus. Your career center probably has more resources. The part about democratizing this is to give options to everybody. So if you're an engineer at San Jose State, you should be able to see the same sets of, if you like these companies, you will like these. These are jobs that are relevant for you.
Let's come down this way, Andy.
So you say you're getting most of your revenue from the employers now. Do you have an authenticity problem on the other side where you are perceived to not put negative content? For instance, you said notes and reviews. You know, do you have a problem serving several masters here? The students who want to be honest, companies who want to protect their image, schools that
Right.
they want something?
So it's very clear to us who our primary customer is. It's the student. Because if we can serve them well and get them to adopt the platform, it's like search and ads. Basically, the student has searched for us. So we do a lot of work in monitoring the quality of the interview notes, for example, the quality of the content. It's both moderated by other students as well as every interview note that comes into the system, we moderate. So far, we haven't really seen that. It might be a good problem to have, honestly, if we get 10 million students that are putting junk on there.
Lars?
So who loses as you succeed here? Is it I have trouble seeing it as Monster. You said it's not the career center. So where are you picking up and sort of what does this business look like? Well, what's a good comparable to sort of where you see this business in 5 years in terms of how the model evolves?
Right, so there's, we've been called a useful Facebook by some, and I don't know if that is necessarily the most relevant metaphor, but it's a decent one, where if you imagine going onto a network and you see alumni and jobs and opportunities that are personally curated for you, served up to an audience that actually believes that if it doesn't show up in my feed, it's not relevant, right? So that's a metaphor. The way we see this develop is there are lots of companies that, personally, I don't go hire at MIT, which is I'm an alum, but it's very hard to go to a career fair. So this whole notion of opening up the market for young talent to people that don't hire on campus, we believe there's a pretty strong market for that. There's also a strong market for extending the reach of large companies that do go on campus to campuses they don't go to. So even the YouTubes and the eBays and the Googles can only go to a finite number of campuses.
Tony?
Yeah, it feels like it'd be susceptible to a tremendous amount of churn, and I'm wondering what's the value once somebody's gone through this, right? A college student, it's
Right.
in your name, so I don't see how you have any relationship with anyone once they've gone through this process, and
Yeah.
for that 12-month period.
This is absolutely, which is why the career center relationships we have, and there's about a dozen of them, where every class that leaves is replaced by a freshman class, is pretty key. We understand that, we get that. The good news about working in this day and age is career centers need a lot of help. We thought we were going to be their worst enemy. We're not. They're actually embracing this. Okay, that's one. In fact, there are career centers that are actually putting us on top of their career portals, so people have single sign-on from their existing backend systems. So that's one. From a alumni perspective, there are lots of tools that can be built to increase engagement for recently graduated alums who are now either employers or in a position to give back to the community. We haven't launched any of those, but I think that the way to crack that is to provide features that are actually engaging to maybe the first 5 years after you graduate, what you want to do back with your school, maybe go hire back there. So there is an alumni piece to this that we didn't get a chance to actually discuss.
Awesome. College Feed. Sounds good. Everybody good stuff? Congrats.